Good morning, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank Brendan for inviting me to be part of this initiative. I've spent half my life in Galway, and I've spent half my life in Brussels, and 20 years working for the environment. So being part of the National Park City Galway is like bringing the two halves of my life so far together. So it's very nice, and thanks for that. So in these 10 minutes, I want to talk about the European Green Deal and how the National Park Galway, City Galway, fits in. So going back to Daniel's presentation, he mentioned the top down. So I guess this is top down, but I wholeheartedly endorse what he says, that an initiative like the National Park City Galway is a very important grassroots, and the president actually also mentioned grassroots level. So I think both of these approaches are needed to achieve a green economy as well, in a green world. So what is the European Green Deal? It is a growth strategy. It was published 10 months ago, and it has green at its heart. And that means that environment and climate objectives they're no longer considered to be nice to have, as long as the economy is going well. They're considered to be essential to have, if we talk about growth. And so using another metaphor, I think you can say that environment and climate up to now has been like two carriages at the back of the policy train. And now we've brought them forward in the European Green Deal into the engine for growth. And because it's the European Green Deal is considered to be a growth strategy with green at its heart, it is now top of the political agenda, which is a first in my 20 years working in the environment. Now, the overall goal of the European Green Deal is climate neutrality by 2050. That means no more net emissions of greenhouse gases, and at least a reduction of 55% by 2030. But it's not just about cutting emissions by 2050. It's also about improving or increasing our ability to absorb what we do emit, so-called nature-based solutions. These goals are at the top of that slide where it says climate pact and climate law. Now, further down in the slide, there's something called ensuring just transition for all. This is because part of the European Green Deal is to try to make sure that no one is left behind. So we know that if we go for a Green Deal and green at the heart of the economy, people like sectors like the coal industry, people working in the peat industry, their livelihoods will change, and there needs to be a consideration of that and funds available so that no one is left behind in the transition to green. So it's so-called just transition. Now, also to get to 2050 climate neutrality, we know that we have to rethink many existing policies. And again, you see them in that slide: energy, transport, industry, agriculture, food production. As well as the nature, like protecting nature, eliminating pollution. We also need to make sure that investments that are made that investment is made in green projects. And we also need to influence the world attitude as well, in order to achieve what we want in terms of the planet. So in the 10 months since the European Green Deal was published, there's been a lot of work going on in the building blocks of the European Green Deal. So, for instance, the first and foremost is this European climate law. This is being negotiated, and it has the goal of 2050 climate neutrality and a goal, the 2030 goal of at least 55% reduction. It has this in the European climate law. Now, this is being negotiated at the moment by national governments and by the European Parliament, because a caveat I have to say is that the Commission, where I work, we propose the law, but it is the national governments in the setting of the European Council and the European Parliament who actually decide what becomes law. So it's currently being negotiated with them. We also have the Circular Economy Action Plan, which was published in March this year, focusing on eliminating and reusing waste. And there are many strategy documents that have also been published in the last 10 months that are starting points for change. For instance, an important one for the National Park City Galway is the Biodiversity Strategy 2030, which was published in May. There's also a Farm to Fork strategy, which is about focusing on fertilizer and pesticide use in organic farming. There's an industry strategy, which is looking in particular at small and medium-sized enterprises. And there's this month, the Renovation Wave strategy was published, which is about renovating buildings to become energy efficient. And again, on the European Green Deal side, when we look at the money side of things, the EU works on a 7-year budget, and this is currently being negotiated for 2021 to 2027. But at the same time as that budget, I'm sure most of you are aware that there was a big recovery fund or a stimulus plan agreed in July this year by all of the EU governments, and it's in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, but it's a very sizable fund. Its official name is Next Generation EU, but that is also being negotiated at the moment with the national governments and with the European Parliament. But in July this year, the national governments committed that 30% of both of those monies, which is would be committed to climate goals. So that means that the European Green Deal will have a very sizable budget. I mean, we're talking about in the region of 500 billion euro in total across the EU, and the hope is that those budgets will be agreed so that spending can start on the 1st of January 2021. So how does the National Park City Galway fit into this Green Deal? As I said, I think that the main hook is the Biodiversity Strategy 2030, because in that strategy, it calls on cities of over 20,000 inhabitants to come up with urban greening plans by the end of 2021. And urban greening plans could be urban farms, green roofs and walls. It could be tree-lined streets, accessible urban gardens, stopping the use of pesticides, many things in those greening plans. And to help in that, the Commission would set up a platform in early 2021, which offers technical guidance and also help in mobilising funds to develop the plans, because for instance, one of the ways is through the LIFE programme, and I know Galway already has received money through the LIFE programme, which is a dedicated fund for environment and climate projects and initiatives. In the Biodiversity Strategy 2030, there's also mention of the Green City Accord. This is an umbrella for cities that come up with these urban greening plans. It's a voluntary movement of European mayors of cities, and they support local implementation of the European Green Deal, focusing on water quality, air quality, reduction of noise pollution, improvement of nature and waste. So that's an umbrella. It was launched last week, the initiative. It's open for online signature at the moment. Of course, the biodiversity strategy also talks about a target of planting 3 billion trees. And this obviously applies to cities as well as forests. And we know, again, through Brendan and the Terryland Forest Park, that there's been a huge work going on in Galway in Terryland Forest Park and planting trees. So that's one, I think, major hook between the National Park City Galway and the European Green Deal. Another is, of course, the Circular Economy Action Plan. This was published in March this year. It's the second such action plan. And of course, a lot of work has already been done in trying to make the economy more circular. And again, I know that Galway has done a lot in municipal waste collection, like the Cash for Can initiative. And so the Commission wants to step up cooperation again with Member States at a local and a regional level to see how best to use EU funds. And so there are several initiatives planned that can help cities to become more circular. There's also the Renovation Wave strategy I mentioned. This was published in October this month. And the goal there is to double the rate of renovation of buildings for energy efficiency, because buildings are responsible for about 40% of EU's energy consumption and for about 36% of EU greenhouse gas emissions. So, and yet we find in studies that only 1% of buildings are being renovated per year to make them energy efficient. So there's a huge possibility there to reduce emissions and actually to make people's lives better, because it also addresses what's called energy poverty. So the more energy efficient buildings are, the less it costs homes. Now, under that renovation wave strategy, there's also an initiative called European Smart Cities Marketplace. And again, it's a blueprint. It's meant to help local and regional authorities that are interested in investing in renovating buildings for energy efficiency in urban renewal. As well as so we have the biodiversity strategy, the circular economy action plan, the renovation wave strategy. There's also Horizon Europe, which is a research program, and there's a program going on, an initiative going on there called Climate Neutral and Smart Cities, which again is, I think, an initiative like the National Park City Galway could find a way in there to also reach your goals. So these are all initiatives that are going on at an EU level where I think Galway can take part and receive funds through these programs and initiatives, and also be seen for what it's trying to achieve, because I think it goes back to what Daniel said about not just being a top-down approach, but a bottom-up approach as well. And also, as I said, the President mentioned grassroots level. So this is really the meeting point between the EU level and the National Park City Galway. On that point, I would mention that the European Environment Agency published a 5-year State of the Environment report 10 months ago as well. And in that, they recognise cities as hubs of creativity. Because I say a lot of people live in cities, so it's easier to experiment with ideas, to find out what works, what doesn't work, and to feed that back and actually become part of the policy making, not top down, but feeding back into policy making. And I think that's somewhere that the National Park City Galway can also make its mark. Mind you, there was another report published this month on the state of nature, which on the one hand is a very sad read, because it shows that 80% of protected habitats across the EU are in a poor condition. And of course, agriculture is a main pressure on the state of nature, but urban infrastructure also is. But on the other hand, in that State of Nature report, it up a lot of inspiring success stories where there's targeted action at a local level, and shows what can be achieved at that. And again, I think and a lot of these initiatives, by the way, are funded also through the LIFE programme. But again, that's where I think the National Park City Galway can be such a success story, can feed into policy, can really make a difference to what's happening at the top-down level. So for me, the National Park City Galway is like a living example of a local Green Deal. The mandate is cross-sectoral. You're committed to sustainability, to cross-learning, to learning from different sectors of society, and to making Galway a better place to live. So I'm very happy to champion Galway at a European level. And I think the main thing I can offer in a sense is to keep an eye on initiatives, gather information on initiatives that might be useful to the National Park City Galway, to feed that back to you, and also to spread the word here on what's happening in the National Park City Galway. So I'm very excited to be involved and to follow the progress of National Park City Galway. Thank you very much.